Thank you for attending the seminar. So today I want to present to you the current works and future perspectives of research, of studies, of conservation of textiles in the Temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari. And this whole project is possible thanks to cooperation between the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw and the University of Warsaw. So those both parties, the cooperation between these two parties allowed us to join the works on site at the temple for 2 years now. We have another 2 seasons planned. So we do have a lot to look up to. And in the pictures you see also my students. So until now 4 students joined the expeditions. And yeah, so first I would like you to outline what is our goal, what are our aims and scope of our works. So we are conservators of textiles. 2 years ago, we arrived for the first time in the temple and we set up a kind of a, let's say, on-site conservation studio dedicated specifically to textiles and to painted textiles, so organic materials. At the moment, this studio, let's call it that, it's set up, it works, and we continue our work on the textiles. So what do we do? First of all, we do extensive studies of how they are made, of the technology and the techniques. This is the research and study part of our job. Then we have another part is that we develop methods of conservation, which is a very important part of that job, since we don't have that many similar examples of conservation of textiles that are being worked on site. So we have specific challenges that we have to face. And then we conduct the conservation treatment. For now, most of the works are limited to or preventive conservation or very basic treatments that are aimed at preserving the current state of the textile, or stabilizing them, let's say, as a preparation for future works. And since we already have confirmed at least, hopefully more than 2, but for now we have 2 seasons confirmed. So we also plan for the future, and we plan how we can develop and broaden the scope of our works, and plan the next steps of conservation. So I would like to present a context of the objects that we will be talking about. I will show them in a second. So those objects, those textiles and painted textiles, they come from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd millennium in the Hathor Shrine. Some of them, other are a little bit older. Some of them are even from the pharaonic period. And part of our work at the very beginning was to go through the boxes with those fragments of textiles that were collected for the past 3 to 3 years before we came there. And I don't remember how many boxes of that we went through, but tens of them, which means literally thousands of pieces, small and larger ones. And during that work, we selected the pieces that were the most interesting, the most meaningful in terms of research perspectives as well. And I mainly want to talk about two types of objects. First, all of them are funerary shrouds, Roman funerary shrouds. This is what I would like to accentuate. So the first type, let's call it for like today's needs, shroud with modeled faces. They were made during the second half of 3rd century AD. And we have a little bit older shrouds of a Soter type. I will show pictures in a moment, of course, which is probably, this Soter type is probably very well known to everyone who's interested in funerary traditions in the Roman period. Other types of objects that we found was textiles with texts, with writings, textiles with dyed, I would say ornaments, but they are very basic. They are just lines of color usually. So very simple ornamentation, if you can even call that decoration, but they are dyed. And fragments, like thousands of pieces of very normal plain looking shrouds and bandages and possibly like items of clothing and so on. So today we are focusing on the Roman funerary shrouds. So what are the main problems we have to deal with? The problems come from the fact that those shrouds, they were already excavated before. This current expedition is not the first one that took them out of their original location. And our works have already confirmed that when for the first time the Hathor Chapel was emptied by archaeologists, they dealt with material that was already fragmented, and they put it in one heap of material that after the archaeological work was put back into the tombs. But of course, it was at that moment, it was already mixed up. So it's already confirmed, we've already confirmed that pieces, fragments of one object, like one shroud, were excavated during current works in 2021-23. They were excavated from different tombs, still in one chapel, but from different tombs. So if this is confirmed, then we deal the whole collection of objects that were excavated in the Hathor Shrine. We treat it, we don't divide it into tombs for our needs. We treat it as one collection, since we are trying to find fragments of several shrouds within that whole collection. So this is one challenge we are facing. And as you can see, even in the picture, their state of preservation, their condition is very poor. So about that, I will tell a few more words in a moment. And another final issue is that if we are trying to possibly segregate the fragments to form individual shrouds, then it is challenging, because the materials that we are dealing with were very uniform among that time, among that period. Even older ones look very similar. All are, of course, natural organic materials, very uncharacteristic. So it required a special approach to be able to divide it into single individual shrouds, which we are ultimately aiming for in the future. And a few more examples of the state of preservation. The fragmentation I've already mentioned not once. Then a lot of those textiles are very brittle, especially the painted ones, because of the binder in the paint, because of the resins that dripped on those fragments during the burial rituals or afterwards during the long history of the temple. Those fragments are usually, a lot of them is very folded, so we don't see, like when we get them for our works, we the first stage is always trying to open them to see what they actually are, like in the picture in the right bottom corner. They are very tarnished as well. And the decoration on some of them, is on the painted shrouds, the decoration is sometimes so damaged that it's even difficult to see what was depicted on that fragment. So how do we approach this difficult situation if we have this aim of subtracting fragments of individual shrouds? Our approach has to be very methodical. So one of the fundamental parts of our work is documentation, a very thorough documentation, of course, descriptory. We take pictures and we utilize also UV light, which is very useful for the paint layer. So as I mentioned, we don't divide this collection into tombs for our needs, for our research needs. Each individual piece from the whole collection, from the Hathor Shrine, we treat it as a single object. So we perform all the studies at the same level of meticulousness and detail for each single object. And some of the pieces of those textiles are very small, like a couple centimeters. Of course, there are larger ones, but we do have to deal with a lot of very tiny pieces. So what is displayed below on this slide is my table in which I put the data for every single piece of textile that we work with. So we collect characteristics like, of course, the dimension, the weave, not always it's the plain weave, all the possible parameters of threads that we can collect, that are visible, that are discernible, that about the paint layer. Some visual cues other than the technology of making, are also very useful. Sometimes we see a very specific type of damage or a very specific color. Like specific types of damage could be, for example, charring from burning. Not all pieces have that, for example. So we can use it as a key to possibly see if they fit together or not. This is just, of course, one of the tools that we will use in the future. And so I would like to present like give you a closer look on the shrouds from the second half of the 3rd century AD, the ones with the modeled masks. This is actually our main focus at the moment. For now, we found about in the objects that were already excavated, as I said, a few years before, we found about 80 fragments, various state of preservation, various sizes, and the state of them as they are presented to us is as you see in the pictures. So for some of them it's very clear what is depicted, but on the others not necessarily. On some of them there is just I don't know, like 20-30% of paint layer left, but we assume that they will still belong probably to a shroud if we see the remnants of the paint layer. At the moment, it seems like we are dealing with 7 different shrouds, possibly. This is yet to be confirmed. So if they were not damaged, that they would look like this shroud on the right. But for us at the moment, it's just small, tiny pieces that we treat. So what do we do with them? I would say that we kind of divide the works between the upper part, which is the modeled face. In the picture on the right, you see, I hope you see that there is a lot of mortar used to form the nose, for example, to form the hair, and so on. So this is a different type of problem for consolidation, but we do that. And then we have the bottom parts of those shrouds that are flat, that are supposed to be flat. They were painted flat. They don't have any modeled parts. So we basically start with surface cleaning very gently. If we need to, we perform the consolidation of the paint layer, and as I mentioned, sometimes the mortar layer on the faces. And we aim to remove deformations. When it comes to the flat parts, it's kind of easier. As you can see on the left, there are some simple methods we can employ. When it comes to the masks, it's a bit more difficult. And these are some examples of the results of our work. These are maybe not that extreme, but I think I have more extreme examples later in the presentation. So hopefully we will be able, these are just a few selected examples. So hopefully in the future we will have many more of them, and we will be able to put them together in conservation. And the works that you see on the screen, they are conducted not only by me, of course, also by my students who learned, I would say, very fast some of the new methods they possibly didn't know before about working with paint layers, not only the textiles. So as you can see, their work is quite spectacular. And as I mentioned, the masks are a little bit more tricky. They are very much deformed and folded up while they should be convex. So this is what we are trying to achieve. We need to give them back their proper, correct form. So we are using some methods, very simple ones, as you see, like building convex forms to do the primary initial shaping. So as you can see, those forms allow us to unfold correctly those masks. We can't do it when they are laying flat. And on those forms made of soft materials, we can straighten the parts that can be straightened. We can align the different parts of the masks according to their original position. This is one of the more original objects. This is a mask of a child. It's a very small. And as you can see, it was burned. On the left, you have how it looked before we took it into conservation. We didn't expect that it's going to be so large, actually, but this is how it looks unfolded. And this one is special also because of its eyes. So I will come back to that later. So a part of our work is also to provide those convex shapes and forms to store the masks in the future. They need some kind of convex shape behind them to hold their form. So in cooperation with conservators of sculpture, we also developed like a more stable form made of gypsum for now, which will be the basis for possibly making some different, those masks from like a different material, like epoxy, laminate, or something like that. So coming back to these burnt masks, I will talk for a moment about what are the main problems with when it comes to research. So this child's mask we discovered thanks to the microscopic pictures mainly, we discovered that it's got a very original trait, a one that we didn't see before. In the center, you see something that possibly might be metallic. I'm not going to say silver for sure. This would require a confirmation through analysis of samples or in situ analysis, but instrumental analysis. For now, we have those pictures that look like it's metallic. And so if we can confirm that it's silver, that will be a very, very original example. Since we don't know any other Roman funerary shrouds with modeled masks of this type to have any metal in them. So these are some other small pieces that have kind of metallic ornaments, possibly, but again, this will have to be confirmed. And when it comes to research, we employ, as I mentioned at the beginning, the UV light. In case of some very damaged pieces like this one, it allows us to see a little bit more, although I understand that in this specific case, it might not be that easy since the damage is really large. But it allows us to see the distribution of different pigments, of binders for those pigments, and of different substances, mainly glues and resins that were used. So the idea is that using those UV light pictures, it might be an aid for us in the future to put the pieces of single shrouds together. And as I mentioned, it helps us sometimes see specific pigments, like in this case. This is missing like an arrow, like a pointing arrow in the slide, but on the left, in the left bottom corner, you see a palm of a hand, and you see this orange hue on it. So UV light in this case helps us to identify that this orange color is madder, which is consistent with what literature tells us about how those funerary shrouds were made. And we can also better see some characteristics of those textiles that are not visible in daylight. On the right, you see something that we will still investigate it more, but we noticed some marks that possibly might be like an underpainting, not very sophisticated, of course, but just a very simple outline made on the clean linen. And what else we learned? We learned that we have it confirmed that the technique and technology of making of these masks is very consistent. We know from our observations and from literature that on those faces that were put, there were put like resin varnishes, but only in some selected spots. It was put mainly on the dark areas, on where the black color was. So it was the hair, the eyebrows, the eyes. So sometimes we can see it with naked eye on these objects. Sometimes it's difficult, but on the UV light pictures, this bluish hue you see over the eyebrows, over the hair. This is the glow, the luminescence of the resin varnish. So again, it's nicely confirmed that it is all very consistent with how they were, let's say, supposed to be made, as the literature and the research states. And to the other type of shrouds, these ones don't have modeled faces, they are just flat, and they depict like one single figure. It could be the Osiris, it could be a figure of a goddess or of the deceased person, but they have very similar composition. On the right, I put an example, just how they usually look like as a reference. And again, to the left, you can see what we are working with. Until now, we identified about 350 fragments. Not all of them are large. I would say the majority of them is very small. But I am hopeful that since the composition and the depictions were quite similar, they didn't differ much between within one type. I'm still hopeful that we, thanks to those small details in the depictions, we might be able to place them somewhere within the depiction. But yes, this is exactly what we are working with most of the time, very small pieces. And the conservation is the main steps on the conservation of the research are pretty much the same as with the modeled faces, with the shrouds with the modeled faces. So you can see, yeah, a centimeter next to like a tape measure next to those objects, and so you see the scale. They are not very large. This piece is the largest one that was found that we know of. So it's about, as I remember, 160 or 80 centimeters. And it was heavily damaged by fire and by resin, possibly hot resin that was dripping on it. And this resin is really problematic because it stiffens, it makes those areas where it dripped, it makes them very hard, very extremely brittle, difficult to even touch, like manipulate, to do anything with it. So for the safety of the object, we had to remove them, remove this resin as much as we can. So this is how it looks after the last season. It was mainly straightened. It was cleaned as much as it could. It was consolidated. The paint layer was a little bit brittle, so we consolidated it. And this is a great example, a great object for future works as a kind of a reference piece. It's probably the largest one that we have in this collection, so we will be able to use it as like a reference point for other pieces. Another shroud that is in this group, possibly we have 5, but again, this needs to be confirmed. A lot of research has to be done to confirm it. So here we had the first, for sure, this is like one single shroud, of course. And this pink one to the left, it's another shroud, a separate shroud from that first one. There are a few pieces of it. It's a bit challenging, let's say. It was one of the more difficult cases for conservation that we had there, because the paint that was used was very reactive to water, to alcohol, to almost everything we tried. Also, there was on some of those pieces was a very thick layer of resin. So taking all of that into consideration, it took me like over a whole season to figure out how to approach this problem. So here you can see the stage of work where we began to unfold it and to straighten it, since the paint layer reacted to water and to even very basic solvents. We had to use water vapor and straighten it basically without touching it. It might sound a little bit abstract, however, we achieved that. So on the left, for example, you see a piece during the humidification, let's say, process, and a little scaffolding made of pins, so that the plastic layer doesn't touch the surface of those pieces, because then the paint just went into like a sticky, gooey mess, and there are a lot of writings that we need to be very careful about in this case. So yeah, so we had to be a little bit creative, but successfully we completed that stage of the work. So those pieces of this pink shroud are again straightened, initially cleaned and consolidated, but this is a very initial stage. We will have to continue in the future seasons. And again, we have the UV light pictures. This is still a methodology to develop when it comes to this other type, the second type of shrouds, because we worked on fewer pieces than with the shrouds with the masks. So we started mainly documentation, and of course we see again specific distribution of binders, of glues, of pigments. We see how specific types of damage look under the UV light. So hopefully, again, we will be able to use those pictures, the UV light pictures of different fragments, to compare them to each other and to be able to use it as a reference to put them together. And to say a few words also about the other types of objects that we found, that were found in the on the site. I mentioned in the beginning the very simply decorated dyed textiles. So for now, the research of those is in the very early stages, to be honest. We mostly, what we've done, we selected them out of, we separate them out of the larger collection. We mainly prepared them for future research. We did some documentation, so you can see some of the effects of it in the pictures. The methodology of the documentation and basic studies is the same as for the painted shrouds. So this is a topic that will have to be developed in the future for sure. And yeah, and so this is our work that we did, like with the conservation. And about the future perspectives, we see that the more that we work with those textiles, of course, we see more challenges that are awaiting us. We noticed new problems. We see the fact that the problems are not getting simpler, they're getting like more difficult to solve. The pieces that you see here are an example of that. We learned that those fragments of shrouds, the fragments of masks, can consist of several different fragments of materials that we have to always keep in mind that the way that they were made was not always very simple. There were numerous different types of linen that were put together to make them. So we have to use all the knowledge that we gather on each single piece, like that I write down in the table that I showed you there before, all the pictures, all the drawings that are made during the season, and try to use all of that to, in the future, hopefully soon, start putting the shrouds together. So we will use some basic characteristics, some obvious ones, of course, like shape, size, dimensions. We will use for sure the depictions, so the iconography. Wherever we can see it, and where we can't, we will check if in the UV light, for example, we can see better. We will use the types of damage. So as you saw, some of them have a lot of damage from burning, from the resins and so on. And yeah, and all the very detailed data on the technique and technology. So on the picture in the upper right, you can see also an example. This is a very small fragment, very uncharacteristic at the first glance, but this fragment also made us realize that even those flat type of the shrouds, the Soter type of the shrouds, they can also consist of more than one textile, which I think it's quite important to realize and to know during the research, because what in the literature you will read that they are made just from like plain linen, but this one piece that clearly consists of two different textiles glued together is a very new information to me. And yeah, it means that I can't exclude the possibility that also the other flat shrouds were made using more than one type of textile. So for the future, what we want to do, we want to, of course, try to match the pieces together to form individual shrouds. We will see how many of them we are able to put together, how many pieces we actually can put together using the knowledge that we gather. Possibly 7 with masks and possibly 5 of the Soter type, but we will leave it to the future. And then this is a very long-term plan. If we are allowed to come after more than those 2 closest seasons, we aim for completing a conservation of at least 1 shroud of each type. Maybe more we will be able to put together, but for now the basic plan is to put together 1. And the other, I will also present you like the last 2 types of objects that we find there. So the conservation of the textiles without colorful decoration, whether it's paint or whether it's dyed. We also select the examples of this type of textiles that are that have some characteristic decoration. So this is the work of our student. You can see that it does make a difference in not only in the visual characteristics, but also in the stability of the physical stability of these objects. And you see that we were able to perform wet cleaning on site, which I didn't. I'm happy that we were able to do it, because these are not the normal conditions that we are working with. So yeah, and in the middle you see the water that comes out of these textiles. So hundreds and thousands of years of grime. And this is a student, Justina, doing work on her selected fragment. And another one, this one was very, this one had a lot of resin that we had to remove. It was very stiff with the resin. So yeah, work of Gabriela. And this one I'm showing you, you might know already this one because I showed it in my lectures. It was already published by Patryk Chudzik, the chief of the mission. This one piece is very important because of the writing. It's luckily the writing was preserved in a way that the name of King Shabaka could be read. So it's an important piece for us also to preserve. The works are not completed on this one. This is a very delicate piece, very brittle and very susceptible to damage. And the writings are made with iron gall ink. Most probably this is a conclusion based on the type of damage that it has. So we until now we were not prepared to complete this conservation correctly. So for now, this is straightened, flattened, it's preserved, it's stored in a safe way, and we hope to continue the works. And yeah, some other examples of textiles with some simple decoration that we will be able, hopefully, to work on in the future. So thank you for listening to and watching also the seminar. On the right, you can see my email in case you have any questions or I can help in any way. And yeah, so thank you for attendance.